guys, Redmaster here, and welcome back to Cards and Castles, the Enchanted Grove. Now today, we will be looking into the Viking faction post the Enchanted Grove launch to see what got changed, but we're not going to go through every card change. We're going to be taking these reviews a little bit different over the next coming days. How we're going to do this is we're going to take a deeper look inside the factions in question, so for this it would be the Vikings, and sort of analyze how they got changed, what their new playstyle is, how what synergies do they have, what combos do they have, what they're weak to, all that good stuff. In addition to going over some of the key cards in the faction that have been changed, of course, those being the cards of more significance that I feel should be illustrated, to be explained, etc. So, with that being said, let's hop straight in to the Viking faction. So where to begin with the Viking faction? Well, how about via the Reddit thread for the Enchanted Grove's announcement, in which it states that Vikings are all about combat potency, strengthening their units, and giving them devastating damage abilities. So from there, we can illustrate the Viking faction as a very sort of buff-oriented faction. They like to give their units some good power-ups and make them last longer on the field. And we can see that through a couple of examples. We see it through Battle Rage. We can see it through Sharpened Swords. We can see it through Thrill of the Victory. We can see it through Battle Ready. And a slew of other cards showing that Vikings are all about giving that strength and giving that power. The Vikings don't solely rely on their buff spells and their beefy units. They also utilize a lot of Chain Lightning and Thunderstrike, which can be traced back to their Viking heritage and their belief in Norse gods of thunder and lightning. But they also deal with Freeze, a very potent ability right now, and a very strong one at that. We know that Freeze was sort of improved to become like this ability, as you can see via the little text box, where you cannot move or attack for one turn and your counterattacks are delayed. It was a pretty big change for Freeze. In the old version, where you can just only move one space up, down, left, or right from a Freeze, if you had 3 movement, that was okay, but it wasn't really an impactful Freeze. It was sort of like a minor inconvenience, not something that can really turn the tides of a game like the current Freeze, in which case you're essentially giving your opponent first strike units. And we all know first strike is a very potent ability right now. It's a very powerful one at that. So, with the Vikings able to access this sort of first strike mimic like a power ability, power as well, you could probably put in there as well. It just shows that they're not a faction to be messed with, and certainly one of the stronger factions. And of course, not to mention their other minor abilities going on, like Siege, activating ability after attacking a building or castle. That can be pretty big. Or their synergies with dragons. They do actually have a lot of dragon spells in here, such as Dragon Search, which we'll go over, Dragon Siege, what else? We got the Dragon Taming, Dragon Bolt. There's a lot of dragon support from the Vikings, which shows how diverse they are and where they can essentially branch out into. And the winds as well. We see that with a lot of Vikings. They're windy, sort of push, pull, move forward, or I think push upwards actually. That's winds of the north, pushing them upward. Each, moving some units into some attack, defenseless positions, or some vulnerable, I should say, positions. It can also be pretty big. So the Vikings, of course, definitely got a huge boost from this patch, if I do say so myself, and a lot of good things have been brought to light from this. However, the Vikings are not without their weaknesses, and the primary flaw for Vikings is time. And what I mean by time is, of course, the time it takes for Viking spells to kick in, or abilities, of course, like Chain Lightning to kick in. And you can clearly see here that there are a couple of instances where you can find this to be true. For example, maybe it wasn't clear, but let me clear it up with Ludicrous Strength. It's a great example of the flaw of time with Vikings. For 4 gold, you have to give a unit +3/+3. Now that's not a bad trade, but you have to consider Ludicrous Strength at 4 gold could be a majority, if not your entire turn, devoted to powering up one unit. So it shows that Vikings do take their time when buffing their units, which means you have to create some sort of priority. You have to, think to yourself on your turn if you're against the Vikings, what do I need to take out if I don't want to see it buffed? Because there's a good chance with the Vikings that they might be carrying a couple of buffs on them, whether it be Battle Ready, Ludicrous Strength, Lightning Blade, Spear Strike, or cards like Temple of the Five Gods, the most expensive building in the game right now. And you can clearly see in the Vikings giving all your units Chain Lightning. That's a pretty good ability. So it'll be rewarded if you can devote a turn to playing Temple of the Five Gods. So we can just see from that there is going to be a lot of time devoted to buffing units with Vikings, but we can see that that time that you put in is rewarded via some big beefy units that can ultimately maybe change the tide of a game or win the entire game depending on where a game is currently at. So now that we've delved into the Viking faction a little bit and highlighted some of their strengths and weaknesses, let's go into some of the cards that make up the faction that have been recently changed that I feel are probably the most important or at least significant changed cards that really show some of the Vikings' power as a whole. Card we'll be taking a look at is Battle Ready. Now, Battle Ready used to be a Viking card that utilized focus, and that focus was dealing 1 damage, a chain of 1 damage, and freezing all targets within that chain. Now, that was an okay spell. It wasn't a powerful spell, and it wasn't a game-changing spell, but it was a spell. But now we see that it's transformed into a giving a unit +2/+2 and knockback, so it's a stat buffing spell. And this kind of illustrates that Vikings are more gearing towards stat buffing and have more of a focus on it, rather than just doing some freeze shenanigans. I mean, there are still freeze cards in here, don't get me wrong, but having cards like this, these spell cards, really show that Vikings are putting more of an emphasis towards stats, and we do kind of know that stats are becoming more important in the game. With stat lines being so even with one another, a simple buff like this at +2/+2 can pretty much change a unit from being, a weak unit to a threat. So I feel like that's very important to highlight. And with its cheap cost, 2 at 2 gold, it can turn the tides at any stage of the game. So I felt like that was, again, another reason why it's such an important card and one that should be showcased, because it just shows the, utilization of stat buffing to increase the power of Viking, to increase the power of your cards. It's just that good. The next card we'll be taking a look at is the Arctic Explorer. Now, there's 2 reasons primarily why I decided to highlight this card within this video. One, we see that factorization is more prominent within this patch, and we've kind of already seen that with a bunch of other cards. But Arctic Explorer being a more important one because it sort of shows that they are paying attention to detail, and that meaning Arctic Explorer is a Viking since he is related to as we see the Arctic, cold temperatures, cold weather, snow, and relating that into the Vikings because Vikings do utilize the freeze aspect. They do utilize those cold temperatures, if you will. So I think that was a pretty cool detail in their factionization process. And the second reason I want to showcase this change is because it, now deals with freezing. Well, more specifically, you can see here deals an extra 3 damage to frozen enemies. That's pretty good. And, well, may not be like game breaking good, but I feel like that's important because it's, well, relating to how freeze is more of a Viking thing now. It's more of a Viking power and ability. Um, with these units, you see that there's can be an emphasis more on, hey, if you use freeze, you'll get this benefit, which is nice. And with also Arctic Explorer, it did used to be that 3/5 that people would run because it's a nice, solid unit to be running. I think now with Arctic Explorer, not everyone's going to run him in their decks, especially if, it's not in a Viking because you can't any longer. But I do like to see that frozen aspect still be kept onto him. His original one wasn't, I think, all that strong. I barely remember what the old one was, to be honest. But it just shows that maybe they're paying a bit more attention. They want to create more factionization, and hopefully these are good first steps with Arctic Explorer. And I think hopefully down the line we can get more like this. So I like this change, and again, those two reasons why I felt it's important to showcase that it's a very, not very, it's a good change to the card. I like it. The next card we'll be going over is the Lich. Now, the Lich I chose to highlight in this video is for similar reasons to Arctic Explorer. I find that with Lich's new freezing ability, it places more emphasis on freeze as an important Viking ability rather than just some extra power that they have that can be useful sometimes. No, it's a good ability that Vikings are proud to utilize. And we can see that through Lich. With Lich, of course, his initiative is to freeze 2 enemies, and his last will is to freeze 2 allies. Now, I find that freezing, if you get it early enough, can be quite devastating. So that's why I like to run Lich in some of my Vikings. Not all of them, but some. Because I find that with freezing, it can buy you some time, and it can help clear out some board presence, or some enemy board presence, if you will, seeing as how it delays counterattacks, so you're getting first strike, free first strikes. So I thought it was a kind of unique change to give Lich, just one of my more favorites in this expansion, since Lich, of course, previously you had to sacrifice a mage, and he was slow, and it just didn't really work out. So I think this is a great change for Lich, and one that's probably a indicator that they are placing emphasis on freeze being this exclusive Viking power that everyone should be using. From there, we move on to Sheep to the Slaughter. Now, with Sheep to the Slaughter, when I was originally looking at this back in the beta, I'll admit that I didn't think much of it, and I'm pretty sure that there are those out there who don't think much of it now. However, with Sheep to the Slaughter, it's sort of a showcase as to why the push and pulling aspects, or the wins, if you want to be more specific, of Vikings is crucial, and it can be game changing. I want to say something else, but I lost in the moment. We can see Sleeps to Slaughter has an ability of giving a melee unit Thunderstrike this turn and dragging enemy units 1 space forward. Now, with the pulling aspect of this card, I think it's very important because people don't see it coming. They usually place their units in just the right position to where they are just barely out of enemy reach. So with Sheath the Slaughter, if you're carrying 1 or 2 of these in a Viking deck and you just play it, you've now not only given a melee unit Thunderstrike, which on its own can be a great ability pairing up with any sort of chain or explosion. You're also pulling all of the enemies 1 space forward, some of which will be, able to get hit by your unit. So it really opens up your units to launch a counterattack, a counteroffensive, counter push, whatever you want to call it, and you have just completely wrecked the opponent's board. They are left defenseless, and now you have the advantage, and they're going to have to either use all their resources to push you out or give up. So, well, not give up. Maybe give up depending on how far into the game you are, but again, it just shows Sheep to the Slaughter's power. And I have used this in the beta, and I have to say it's a pretty nice card. I've actually had Sheep to the Slaughter used against me a couple times, I will say. And I have just found that it does incredible work for whoever is using it. So, Sheep to the Slaughter, very good, and I think it's kind of an underused card in my opinion. It's so powerful. I think people over time will start to use this card more and more as we get further on into this expansion. Next card we'll be going into is the little Spear Strike. Now, Spear Strike does do a lot in one card, and I think it's important to showcase this for a 3 gold spell. So essentially, Spear Strike, you're giving a random friendly unit 5 attack this turn and drawing a card. So with that, it's doing 2 things. It's not only cycling itself with the draw, but it's also pretty much going to remove something at 5 attack, which is pretty big. And not just for that attack amount, but also because you're recycling the card. Not something you see a lot within the Viking faction. So I think it's pretty important. you're getting a free card back for removing something. Um, and at 3 gold, it's pretty, unexpected. It could be played at any time, and you could still possibly be seeing um, something else come out, something else be played. So it really shows that Spear Strike is probably one of the better of the Viking cards right now, and it's only a common too, which is very good. I recommend that if you are running a Viking deck, at least try to maybe incorporate 2 Spear Strikes into your deck, uh, because you're doing a lot with this card, and I feel like that's going to be more realized within the coming days, or maybe coming weeks, depending on, yeah, who knows. Um, but like I said, just a great overall card with that +5 attack, and the drawing of, recycling itself. Overall, it's just a overall solid card. I said overall twice, but that's okay. That's okay. One of the final cards we'll be going into in this video is going to be the new Yarm Giant. Now, when Yarm Giant originally came out, there were a lot of issues with him in terms of how powerful he is, how, overall his presence was just, it was a lot going on with him back in the day when he was first released. But now he's been changed, and some people do say that he's not as powerful as before, but I do say that he is still somewhat of a monster, still somewhat of a beast, and I'll explain why. He does have the combination of Thunderstrike and Chain Lightning, which by itself is some people don't realize this yet, but that's sort of a deadly combo, Thunderstrike and Chain Lightning. I might make a video separately on this topic at a different time, but essentially it goes into the advanced mechanics of AoE attacks and multipliers, which again I'll explain in a later video. But just that, having that power alone in one card, usually that sort of power is at least two card setup. Having it in one card is pretty incredible, and that damage of just Chain Lightning 2, doing one more than the regular Temple, but less than Lightning Blade, however, it's still pretty devastating. And I would like, maybe if it was a more powerful card, it would have more health. 7 is a good place to have it to not completely break the game. But that Thunderstrike of just knocking everything back in a, that frontal cone, that, 2 rows back, and dealing chain damage for every target hit by the Thunderstrike, having that Chain Lightning, go off maybe more than once, maybe 3 times, is just so powerful, and a reason why I want to showcase this now. Some people don't really know how powerful Yarm is now. It's still pretty powerful, and one that I would say has yet to be explored, and we might be getting some crazy things with Yarm Giant in the future, but we'll see. We'll see in the coming weeks. Just, I feel like this is a very powerful card now, and just one that I wanted to showcase within this video. With that being said, guys, that's going to close the video for today. I know I didn't cover a lot of cards in the Viking faction, but there are just a lot of cards and a lot of other good changes in that faction. So if you guys want me to do a follow-up, please let me know in the comments section below. But other than that, if you guys enjoyed the video, please give it a like, share with your friends, and like I said, comment down below if you want to see a follow-up to the Viking faction. There will be more videos coming soon on all of the different factions currently in the game, so be sure to look out for that. If you are new to the channel, please make sure to hit that subscribe button in it, and if you want, turn on the notification bell to get notified for when those videos on the other factions go live to the public, so that way you can make sure that you are ahead of the game, I guess, by notification squad. Good stuff. So with that being said, guys, until next time, stay gaming.